Hello and welcome all for joining today's webinar. My name is Vaibhav Wadekar. I worked as Premier Support Architect in BMC Software. Today, I am going to talk about the topic BMC Helix Advanced Data Maintenance Best Practices. Let me start with a story. You all know the feeling of getting a new laptop, and after a year of using it, you start noticing the performance issues in the laptop as it getting slower and slower every single day. In order to resolve the performance issue, you take your laptop to a service desk professionals, and the service desk professional mention you that there are too many things that has been installed or too much of our data that has been reside into the system. There might be some step that we can apply to make your system faster. The couple ways like uninstallation of unneeded software. Second is deleting of the data that is no longer needed. And then he start asking you what software is a good candidate for uninstallation and what data that can be deleted from the systems. The result of doing all of that activity will result in improving the system performance, and the net is the laptop is faster than what it used to be. Today we're going to talk about a similar aspect, however for BMC product, BMC Helix Digital Workplace Advance. Digital Workplace Advance is a powerful tool to create workflows and services using multiple connectors. I see customer is really been creative and what can they do in BMC Helix Digital Workplace. As with any systems, when the data grows, leaps and bounds, there are best practices that need to be implemented to archive or delete things which no longer needed. The agenda for today's webinar is cleaning up process data. This is the data that gets generated when you raise a request. And if you would like to look at what is the execution path that the process has taken, it's called process execution data. Second, we're going to talk about cleaning up service revisions. You can ask any developer who's working day in, day out on services. Sometimes he get one suggestions, he make modifications to the service, and he publishes the newer revision. Over a period of time, there are many revisions that happen. So we are going to take a look at how to clean that service revisions. Number 3 is archival of native catalog request. So as you raise native catalog requests, you reach to a point where these requests are in the millions, and you need to put some effort to delete some of this native catalog requests which either in the closed state and been closed for almost a year, 2 years ago. So you define that criteria. So we're going to take a look at that. I can assure you, if you follow along with these items we're going to discuss in today's webinar regularly, every month or every quarter, you will see performance gains in BMC Helix solution, which I will explain in upcoming slides. The target we aim to achieve by doing this cleanup is end users are happy using the BMC Helix Digital Workplace without a performance glitch. Now let us take a look at the first item in our agenda about cleaning up process execution data. Process execution data or process instance data is used when you review what path the workflow has taken based on user choices. If you look at this picture, it will show you the process execution of a request. You can see from the diagram, when the request was raised, it currently waiting for request manager approval. This process execution diagram is very much important when we debug request or process failures. There is also a feature introducing starting 200203 where you can restart the process if it failed due to the data issues. what we are looking in today's webinar, this process execution data is meaningless to us when the request is successfully completed and closed over a year ago. For example, you have raised a request in 2016, and the question is, would you need that process execution data for any time in future? The answer is no. Now let us understand how this process execution data is being built at runtime when you click on View Process. To view the process runtime data, log on to BMC Helix Data Workplace Advanced Catalog, and from the reports, click on Service Request. Select a request for which you would like to see the process overview. Click on Action and Details. You will see an icon called View Process and the date it was requested. The moment I click on the date, it will show you a pictorial diagram of a process. So here you can see ours is a simple process, and when you click through each of this block, you can see the output and the request has been completed. We looked at how to view the process. Now let us understand how this data is being built at runtime. So when you click on the view process, it gathers the data from all these tables using join, and the result is the diagram. I have customers that using BMC Helix Data Workplace Catalog for almost 5 years, and based on the monthly request of 90,000 tickets, the size of the DWP tenant database has grown close to 3 terabytes. Out of these 3 terabytes, close to 1.5 terabytes of data is used by this process execution. It is a massive amount of data. The amount of records created by the execution of a process instances is phenomenal. It becomes a problem in terms of a performance and a DB size. The number of records that get created in these tables increases with the activity of the customers and the complexity of the processes that they developed in terms of how many call activities that they have, how many activities they have in the particular set of workflow, how many loops are there. And most of these records are in the activity tables. You might have a question about how to clean this data. The answer is in my next slide. How to clear the stale data for the process activity instance. The solutions are in 21.x we can enable the policy. For version 2002/03 you can enable it via process cleanup. And for all version we can also leverage SQL crypt shared by our engineering team. I have documented all this solution in this KA 406174. Let us look at the KA 406174. The problem that we are trying to solve is cleaning up process execution data from BMC Helix Data Workplace. To identify whether we need cleanup or not, you can implement the monitors. The monitors are nothing but some of the SQL queries which can give you an idea about how much data resides in these tables. So as part of this KA, I documented all this SQL statement, and depending upon what was the retention size that you would like to have, you can keep an eye on this and then take an action whether you would like to delete this data on a monthly or a quarterly basis. Part of the premier practice, I normally look at this data every single month and see how much data that has been grown month over a month. So anytime I see that there is an opportunity to clean up this, I go ahead and recommend customer to clean up this data. There are multiple options for process cleanups depending upon the version that you are in. So let us discuss each option in detail. In 21.x, when you access the AR System Archive Manager console, now there is a archive policy for act hi proc inst, and the default is 90 days and you can customize it to according to your needs, and you can enable this policy and get it run. What it will do, it will move the data from main table to an archive table, and then at some point you would like to manually click export and delete to get rid of the data from the archive table. Now, if you are on 2002-03 version, we have a feature that got introduced in there. It's called process cleanup. So the way you can enable the process cleanup is once you log into your catalog server, change the directory to RX scripts, you can then log in with your DWP administrator. Once you successfully log in, the way you can enable this feature is by running a command enable process clean feature. That will enable the feature. There is also a disable process cleanup. So if you want to disable the feature, you can also give a criteria from what date you would like to enable the data cleanup. So as you can see here, I logged in as HANA admin and I updated the setting for process data cleanup to archive any data 10-10-2020. And how do you monitor whether this is actually cleaning up the data or not? So you can actually look at the startup log that is generated in the DB directory of the catalog server. Here is the AR startup log that I have generated. Here you can see that the cleanup interval is set to 60 minutes, the archive interval is set to 180 minutes, and on 0 process instances to clean act table. So these are some meaningful messages that can help you understand that this is actually working. Another way of doing that, if you are on the SaaS side of the instance and if you have access to Innovation Studio, you can enable this feature in Innovation Suite. All you have to do is when you access the Innovation Suite, you have to check these two boxes, is enabled, is to be deleted. So you have to set up these two flags. Besides all of that, I know that there are a lot of process and by doing so, it will add overhead to the systems. And at times, like you don't want, I think the process cleanup activity should work during normal business hour and you would like to take this in your hands. So for that, I think we have had the SQL script. For example, the archive policy, it runs at midnight. So at every midnight, depending on the number of records, it's going to go and archive those records. The second is process cleanup. It will based on the interval it goes and clean up the things. And the last option is mainly about directly executing the SQL at the database level. So the beauty of the SQL script is you should be able to find out a couple things. So here you can set up the retention days and a batch size. So normally I recommend setting a batch size to 5,000 and then data retention either 365 or 730 days, whatever, like 2 year or 1 year data, that according to that you can set it up. And then once you execute this will go ahead and delete the data from all these tables. So far I think this is works the best in my opinion, and I think I have seen customer give the scripts to the DBAs and they will take care of cleaning of the data every single month. Now let us move to the second topic for our webinar today, which is cleaning up service revision. BMC Helix Catalog enable a service catalog administrator to create a new service catalog item based on the existing item. The new version can be modified and saved with its own revision history and details. From this revision history, you can track changes in service details over time. As you can see in my screen, there are multiple service revision. As you work on services, when you make changes and get it from dev to QA to prod, the service revision gets changed. Over a period, if you don't clean up service revision, it ends up with big and bulky service which takes a considerable amount of time with export and import. I have had customers exporting a service that is close to 15 MB and it was taking more than 3 minutes to import, and every time we trying to import, the service resulted in a timeout. And the reason was it has more than 2000 revisions. So let us first understand how to create a service revision. I've logged into DWP Catalog Console. From the services section, I'm opening a service by clicking this button called copy to new version. You're going to create a new version. So here I'm going to call it as code promotion 2. By creating this version, what I just did, as you can see that we have three revisions of this particular service. One is an approve, and then we had publish one revision, and this is the new revision that we created. We go ahead and make some modification, let's say. Save this process. We're going to publish this revision. Currently, as you can see, there are two published revisions. You can unpublish this revision if you would like to, or you can use both the revisions with different name. We have one revision that published. By doing so, you can see there are three revisions. So if I go to the tab called revision history, you can see that for this code promotion, if I just search here, there are three revisions for this particular service. It is very easy to delete the revisions when it is 2 or 10 from this revision history console. But let's say you realize that one particular service has over 2000 revision. As you can see in my screen, I have this service with 2000 revisions. It becomes little tedious to even go ahead and delete all the service revisions. I'm going to do that cleanup of the service revisions from the backend tables. And how do we clean these revisions for all services rather than selecting one service at a time? So the answer to that is in my next slide, which I'm going to present back. So the problem that we are trying to solve here is there are too many service revision for a particular service, and the result of that is it is taking a very long time to import the service, and sometimes it results in timeout. The solution that what we are saying or recommendations is if the service revisions are very minimal, like in the number of 2 to 20, you can leverage the DWP catalog console to go and clean up those service revisions. The other solution to this problem is starting in 2008 version, we also come up with the option that you can only export the latest revision as opposed to go and exporting all those revisions. So how do you export only current revisions? Now I logged into 21.03 DWP catalog version, and if I do the same thing called update collaborator, and if I would like to just export the latest revision, I can see the option called export revision. If you are on 2008 or later version, rather than exporting the whole service, just export the revision. Always make sure that to export a latest revision and cleaning up the service revision history once in a while so that you don't add too many revisions to the service. There are times where we get the service that has too many revisions to start with, and how do you take care of that? So let us discuss this KA 402625 that specifically talk about how to clean up the service revision. So the problem that we are trying to solve is in BMC Helix D2 Workplace Catalog, if you have too many revisions, one way is to clean them is from the revision history table in catalog. But if there are too many revisions, like in 2000s or thousands, rather than clearing them from console, you can do it so from the backend database table. So first of all, how do you monitor how many revisions that you have had, right? So the way is to monitor. In DWP catalog console, you can see the versions, for example, and in the revision history, you can see that there are multiple revisions for this service. This will not give you the numbers per se. So if you need to find out how many revisions are there, all in all, for you can execute this query to get a count of all service revisions which are not published. I have logged on to the database and executed my first query against the DWPC tenant database. You can see that the number of revisions which are not published is 2003. But let's say you want to keep all the revisions that are approved and published. Just would like to list out the revisions which are in draft. So you can go ahead and execute the second query at the database level, which is what I'm going to do now. So I'll go back here and I'm going to execute the second query. And you can see that there are about 2000 rows. Now, as you find out there are this many revisions which are in the draft mode. So how do you get rid of the service revisions after we found out that there are about 2000 service revisions? So if I go ahead and execute this query from the KA at the database level, you can see that there are about 2000 rows. Now let us go back to the catalog console and see, do we see any of the revisions that we have had here? So I will just go ahead and refresh the page here. And you can see that in my revision history, I no longer see the revisions which are in the draft status. So we were able to clear all those 2000 revisions by executing one single select delete statement. So this concludes our second topic on how to clean service revision. Let's move ahead with the third and the final topic for today's webinar, which is archival of a service request. When we raise native catalog request, it ends up creating records on all the table that you see listed on the screen. And if you go back in time, let's say you are generating the data 5 year worth of time, there are a lot many records that had exist in these tables. And the net result of that would be a performance when you try to search the service request in either the My Activities or at the past events, or when you try to search the service request in Smart IT. Because when you make a search, it goes against these tables and particularly my IT underscore SB underscore service request. So the piece of recommendation is you can monitor by running the select count stars on all these tables to give you a fair idea about how many records that we are adding month over month. And anytime you see that there are over 1 million records, then it is time for you to take actions. The problem that we are trying to solve is there are too many native catalog requests has been created over years. And the result of that is you started to not get result in Smart IT because when you search in Smart IT for the DWP request, the default timeout is 10 seconds. So if you are not able to get the request in 10 seconds, that means it does not return the results. So the solution to that is archiving the service request and associated data with the SQL script. In my last slide, I showed you the tables that we need to run archive against. And at the current time, the BMC Data Workplace Catalog doesn't have an ability to archive the service request out of the box and its related tables. As I said, archiving can provide performance improvements since queries will no longer need to query the data that is no longer relevant. Here is the SQL script that the engineering team has been provided. It will generate the archive tables. So it's up to us. We are taking the data from mean tables to the archival table. The script can be compatible with starting version 2002, 21.x. So it is forward compatible. All the records that we are going to do, it will be available in archived records, and it will going to delete the records from the main or the original table. So there is a variable that controls the time window, and as you can see on my screen, the variable is retention days. So I set it up to 730, that gives you 2 years. So any data that was created 2 years back and the request meaning close. The batch size is 5000. So that indicates at any given point it's going to start in the batches of 5000 requests. The other thing that you need to know about the script is this script only take care of the data for the requests that are completed or closed. No data that is active in flight, that is waiting for approval, those will not be actually getting archived. So we are not going to lose any active data or transactional data. So this concludes our third topic for today's webinar about archival of service request. Let's take few minutes and summarize what we have learned today. So we have learned about cleaning up process execution data. Process execution or process instance data, which consists of all those HI table, can be cleaned up in 21.x with the archive policy. In 2002-03, there is a feature to enable and update the interval with which we can clean up the process. If you have access to Innovation Studio, you can enable the cleanup policy from there as well. And the last option, which is actually is the SQL script, which you can control how much data that you want to clean up and for what request. After that, in the second topic, we looked after the cleaning up service revision. We can create mini service revision. I think this is a common problem when the developer works and promote his code from dev to QA to prod. The result of that, each time you import, the new revision is get created. We have addressed that in 2008 and 21.x by just exporting the revision that the person is working on in order to minimize the footprint of the revision. However, at times when you have service revisions which is up to 2 to 20, you can delete them either via DWP catalog console. So if there are service revision which are in thousands or 2000s, catalog console may not be the option. So in that scenario, how do we get rid of the service revision? By executing the select and delete at the database level. We have looked at. And the last topic that we have looked at is archival of service requests. So over a period of time, there are a lot of entries that get created into those service request table. We have to take actions in order to gain performance back. So by doing all these three activities, you're going to tune your detail workplace to be faster, and the net result of that, the user will be happy and enjoying using the BMC detail workplace. I have listed some of the references in this slide which I can refer at a later time. The first link is for the documentation about managing service revisions. This will help you to understand how the service revisions get created. The second bullet point here is archiving service requests and related table. So there is a link for the blog post that the engineering team created in order to address this issue. Thanks for joining this webinar session. I hope it was useful. The final slides share useful links to more information on each of these topics. Finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.